Well, good morning, everyone. What a beautiful day in Wrightwood. Now, for the record, our postal cards are yellow, not blue. But I was standing in line this week at the post office. That's a terrible problem, and we're hoping to get that fixed. So it's a great honor for me to be here on this beautiful morning and to share this solemn occasion with you. But to be honest, this holiday is one that I struggle with a little bit, and I want to tell you about why. But I want to start by talking about the origins of this day, because I think that's important in realizing the significance of what we're honoring today. So most people have heard of the Battle of Shiloh in the Civil War. It was one of the bloodiest battles of that war. Thousands of young men on both sides of that conflict were killed. Shiloh is located in the state of Tennessee, which, just to remind you, is a Confederate state. So many of the Confederate soldiers that were killed in that terrible battle were local boys. And in the years after the Civil War, their mothers and their fathers and their families began the tradition of going to their grave sites located near that battlefield and decorating the graves of their fallen loved ones as a way of commemorating their sacrifice and the events that had happened on that battlefield. And as time went on, they noticed that the graves of the Confederate soldiers looked pristine because they had been cared for every year. But the graves of the Union soldiers, which were also located on that battlefield, were looking uncared for and forlorn. And so they started the tradition of not only decorating the graves of the soldiers that they had known, but also decorating the graves of the Union soldiers that had fought and died alongside their loved ones. And they called that tradition Decoration Day. And that became, over time, to be adopted as a day that we honor all of our military fallen. And we call it now Memorial Day. So I've been in public service 17 years now. I've given a lot of Memorial Day speeches. But I started to really struggle with this day a few years ago when I was in the state legislature. And I met a man named Dante Acosta. He was elected to represent the assembly district around Santa Clarita. And he sat in the chamber behind me just a couple of rows. So he and I became friends, and over time we became very close friends. And one day on the floor of the legislature, I noticed his lapel. And underneath his assembly pin, he wore a gold star. And I asked him, Dante, I noticed that you wear this gold star all the time. What does that mean? And he said, well, I am a gold star father. And he went on to explain how his son Rudy had been killed in Afghanistan in 2011. Now, I had heard of gold star families. I mean, certainly I'd heard of blue star families. I've known many blue star families. Raise your hand if you've heard of blue star families. Blue star families are families that have a loved one deployed in the military. And I've known many of them over the years. Gold star families are families who have lost a loved one in the line of duty. And although I knew what a gold star family was, I had never actually met a gold star father. And it really hit me like a sledgehammer what that must feel like. Because I have two sons. They're 20 and 22 right now, just about the same age as Dante's son Rudy was when he was killed in Afghanistan. And I started to think about what that must feel like, the sacrifice that must be, to think about the son you will never hug, the grandchildren you will never hold, the conversations you will never have, and how, although Rudy has made the sacrifice, that his family bears the burden for that for the rest of their lives. And I joined a small group of Dante's friends because we noticed that Dante, every year on the anniversary of his son's death, would really feel down. And so we started holding a small ceremony in Rudy's honor in a room at the Capitol building every year that we served in the legislature with Dante, just to let him know how much we appreciated his son's sacrifice and his family's sacrifice. And the next time I gave a Memorial Day speech after that, I really struggled with it because it occurred to me how inadequate it is for us to just take a pause on a single day of the year, in between breakfast and the picnics in the afternoon, to pay tribute to these fallen Americans, when for their families, every single day is Memorial Day. But I recently had an epiphany about this, and I want to share it with you. One of the joys of serving in Washington, D.C. is the incredible amount of history that you can find everywhere. And I've taken to jogging around the mall in the morning before my first meeting. And my favorite piece of architecture on the mall is the Lincoln Memorial. It's at the end of the mall. I'm sure that you're familiar with it. It's got that enormous statue of Lincoln looking solemnly out over the mall. And on the other side of it, you can see right across the Potomac, Arlington National Cemetery. It's a very fitting place to pay tribute to the president who brought us through the Civil War. And one thing that I noticed when I was standing in front of the former president's statue that I'd never seen before is that around the monument are written excerpts from some of the speeches that he gave in his presidency. And on the right side of it, in its entirety, is the Gettysburg Address. And in that address, I found the answer to what I had been struggling with about Memorial Day. President Lincoln was giving this speech to commemorate a monument on the battlefield of Gettysburg. And although Shiloh was one of the most bloody battles of the Civil War, Gettysburg was the bloodiest. And in fact, the Battle of Gettysburg still stands as one of the bloodiest battles in the entire history of human civilization. That's how many lives were lost and how many young men and women were destroyed. The lead up to President Lincoln was a former Secretary of State and former senator who spoke for over 2 hours. President Lincoln then stood up and delivered a 2-minute speech that will go down in history as one of the greatest political speeches ever given by any leader anywhere. And what he said was this. He said, "It is impossible for us to commemorate the lives of the young men and women who have been lost in service to our country. They have already done that through the sacrifice that they made. But what we can do as we remember them is to rededicate our lives in service to the cause for which they so willingly gave theirs. And that is the cause of freedom and the defense of liberty. Those are the things that make the United States of America unique among nations." And so what we should take away from our time together on days like today is gratitude. Gratitude, first and obviously, to our men and women like Rudy Acosta, who gave the last full measure of devotion and service to our country. But also gratitude to their families that bear that loss every single day and who really struggle on days like today. But lastly, and most importantly, gratitude that we live in a country like the United States, a country that honors the principles of freedom and liberty for which they so willingly gave their lives. So it is a great honor for me to be here today on this beautiful day in Wrightwood to honor their memory, and it's an honor for me to serve you in the United States Congress. Thank you for having me today.